I'm a rock. I'm a rock, BJ.
All right. You stick with that. You stick with that. BJ from Board Game Gumbo here on Gumbo Live, talking with my guest, Mark Burke from Kolossal Games. Kolossal Games has a fantastic project out on Kickstarter. Steve says cagey. He is. He's a tough nut to crack, but we're going to keep working on it. We're going to keep working on it. And Steve, you're welcome to throw out some of those questions because he'll try his best to answer them. But the game that we want to talk about, BJ from Board Game Gumbo, Gumbo Live, talking about Western Legends from Kolossal Games. It's out on Kickstarter. I've got Mark Burke here, who's the social media manager, correct, for Kolossal?
Yes, that's correct. Community manager.
Yeah. Community manager. Let me throw up a picture here. I think that's the cover of Western.
Yep, that is correct. That is the box art for Western Legends.
Mark, you still there?
Yep.
Okay.
Still here.
I was trying to see if you can see that Western Legends there.
Yeah, there it is. Yep, that is the box cover.
All right, so give us the elevator pitch. What is Western Legends, and why should people be interested in it?
Yeah, Western Legends, obviously from the name, as the name implies, it's set in the Wild West, the late 1800s. And so it's an open world sandbox game, which those terms are generally used when you're describing video games. Open world sandbox game that for 2 to 6 players plays in 90 minutes or less. And in the game, you're taking on the role of an actual historical figure. So someone like Billy the Kid or Doc Holliday or Calamity Jane, Annie Oakley. You even have some characters that are, lesser known characters like Bass Reeves or Stagecoach Mary Fields, that were all characters in the history or folks in the history. But you may not have heard of them because, as I jokingly say, Val Kilmer didn't play them in a movie. So you get to take on the role of one of these characters, and you basically build up their legendary status however you see fit. You can make them break the law, rob banks, rob other players, rustle cattle, and climb up the wanted track, which earns points really quickly. Or you can uphold the law as a martial player and arrest those wanted players or wrangle cattle legally. Take bandits off the board that are running the NPC bandit characters and knock them out of the game. So you have the ability to climb either track, one or the other. So it's a really balanced wanted versus martial player. So there's a lot of player interaction that goes on. The wanted players are generally setting the pace of the game because they're scoring points at the end of every single turn based on how wanted they are. So it's really up to the martial players to step in and arrest them, make them, knock them off of that wanted track so they're not earning points anymore, and kind of making them have to take an extra step to, begin earning points either in a different way, or maybe they want to jump right back on that wanted track again and go back to their life of crime.
Yeah, I threw up a picture. I don't know if you can see it right now. I threw a picture of one of the characters you were talking about. Yeah. Stagecoach Mary Fields.
Yes. Stagecoach Mary has become one of our favorites. She, when we were looking at the characters that we had a few women that were in the game. We knew we wanted some more, so we started doing some research as to other women that were, everybody knows Calamity Jane, Annie Oakley. Those are names that are fairly household. But we wanted someone who was maybe lesser known, so we started doing some research, and we ran across Stagecoach Mary, who was an African-American woman. She worked for the Postal Service, was actually given a dedicated route, which is something that didn't happen very often back then. It only was something that was done with the best of the best. The best of the best out there was you got an assigned route, you ran the route, and she did that for quite a long time, delivering mail back and forth, going back and forth to it's kind of like an orphanage, if you will, delivering there, and actually did some work there as well. So, and then she was a kind of a towering woman as well. She was large in terms of stature, so very strong, very muscular. And she, there's a legend that at her local saloon, she had a standing bet that she could knock out any cowboy in the place. And,
oh, wow.
And she basically said, if I try and I can't do it, then your drink's on me. And there were 4 people that took her up on the bet, and all of them lost. All of them were knocked to the floor. There was also a standing legend. It's been uncorroborated, but there's legend that during one of her mail deliveries, she was attacked by a pack of wolves. And not only did she survive the attack, but she delivered the mail on time. So,
oh, wow.
Really woman and incredible to learn about.
Yeah, so it's kind of the buzzword that we've been talking about with in the board gaming world: diversity, bringing in, being friendly to gamers of all stripes. Is that an important facet of this campaign and of this particular project?
It is absolutely. When we look back at, we obviously we're doing, Wild West, historical figures, but the fact of the matter is the Wild West wasn't just a bunch of white guys with mustaches. And so, you think Old West and you immediately get images of Doc Holliday and Billy the Kid and, even the fictional, your John Wayne, your Clint Eastwood, those characters pop into mind. So we really wanted to make sure that we were focusing on characters that people may not have known about, because back in that day, you had Native American characters, you had women, you had people of color. There were a lot of different races and nationalities and genders that were going on at the time. So we wanted to make sure that we included some of those characters and didn't just stick with the ones that everybody's heard of out there, and kind of give you the opportunity to not only be inclusive and include some of these females and people of color and Native Americans in the game, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to learn about someone you may not have ever heard of, and maybe tweak that interest just enough to where you go look them up online after you're done playing the game to find out what else they did.
So the artwork obviously is just absolutely stunning. I mean, I just can't get over the artwork. Do you know? I know that art is very important to Travis also, as a game developer, and also all that flavor. Heck, he wrote most of the cards, if I remember right, for a lot of the big games, that indie boards and cards have come out, or the Delve game that I love. I found out that he did a lot of the background flavor for that. How much was he involved in the artwork or the art part? Because I know that's one of the things that's big in his background is art direction and art.
Yeah, he played a heavy role with the art direction. We brought on an illustrator by the name of Roland McDonald, who had done some work in the past. He did some illustration work for Stop Thief for Restoration Games. He did some work for a whole slew of things. We basically approached him and we really liked his work. And Travis basically said, "Here's what we want." And showed him the designer of the game. Hervé is French, and a lot of the inspiration behind the game came out of his love for a French comic book series called Blueberry. And he really wanted to emulate that style in the artwork, but kind of combine that, not so much comic book style, but maybe do a little bit of watercolor look to it as well. And what you're seeing, the final result that you have with the art is pretty much all Roland. And Roland actually developed this. He basically learned how to do this on the go, something he wasn't familiar with, and he kind of developed his own style with how he wanted to do it. And he threw a couple of things back to Travis, and Travis said, "This is absolutely what we want. Let's roll with this." And you're right, the art style, I mean, just jumps off the page at you. The more I look at it, especially that box cover, the more I see that box cover, the more my mind is just blown. And I mean, I see this every day being on the Kickstarter page and moderating those comments and handling social media. We've got our images up all over the place, and it still blows my mind that this is our artwork on this game. Roland did an amazing job. He's incredible to work with. I would definitely say if there are publishers out there looking for an illustrator for any titles they have upcoming, definitely check out Roland. He's on social media as Roland the Illustrator on both Facebook and Instagram. He's fantastic to work with, and his work speaks for itself.
I mean, I looked at that box cover, and it's one of those box covers that just absolutely jumps out of the page. But then I started diving in a little deeper, and I'm throwing up a picture of the Doc Holliday. I guess it's the player card. Is that what we're looking at?
That's correct. It's the character card from Doc Holliday.
And I just love this dreamy watercolor style that we see here. It looks old, but it looks fresh. I don't know how it does that, but it looks old and fresh at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's definitely that combination of, the comic book art is what makes it look fresh, but then the watercolor gives it kind of a washed out, old or Wild West feel to it. I think the coloration of the card itself, being that kind of off-white color as well, really helps because it's kind of a dusty, almost wanted poster look to it.
And then I found, let me see if I can bring it up for you. I found these drawings of the weapons, and again, I mean, I'm just fascinated by this. Can you see the weapon cards that I have here?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there are what you're showing there. Those are three weapons in the game: the revolver, the shotgun, and the rifle. They are available in the base game. We actually unlocked a stretch goal that unlocks the Peacekeeper, which is not
Ooh.
in this. And it's basically the weapons themselves all give you different abilities based on which weapon you have. You can hold multiple weapons, but at the start of your turn, you're going to select which weapon is going to be active for your turn. So some of them give you benefits when you win in a fight. They let you draw poker cards. Some of them will, if you know you're going into a fight, one of the weapons, the rifle, actually lets you look at two random cards from your opponent's hand before the fight even starts. So you can look at their hand, and if you see they've got a king and an ace, and you're holding a jack, oh, no, I'm not going to fight you. So you can back out of the fight. So having the ability to really bring these weapons, I mean, yes, they're in the game but we wanted to make them look, still have that same style, that same art, but make them look very much realistic, and just kind of bring that to the forefront, without literally just throwing a Colt 45 on there. We wanted to kind of stylize it a little bit, still make it feel like it fits in the Wild West world that we've created with the art and the graphic design. And I really think Roland did a fantastic job with that.
BJ from Board Game Gumbo here with Gumbo Live. It's a season 2, and we're kicking it off with for Mark Burke, the chubby meeple from Kolossal Games, talking about Western Legends. Hey, a lot of games promise a sandboxy type of game, but Western Legends looks like it delivers. Tell me, in your own experience, I know you've play tested this game, you've played it, you've demoed it. You were telling me before the show that you actually demoed it tonight. Do you have any examples of some game experiences that you've had where people have just, in one game they used this opportunity to win, but in another game it was completely different?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things when there are a lot of games out there that call themselves sandbox games, or I guess not a lot, but there are. I mean, you count the number of sandbox games on one hand and probably still have a couple of fingers left to count with.
Like people would be familiar with Zaya, right? Zaya is kind of one of the more well-known ones, I think, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people, when you hear sandbox, the first games that pop in mind are things like Merchants and Marauders,
Right.
Xia, Legend of a Drift System. Some people will classify Firefly as a sandbox. I don't know that I classify it as sandbox, but a lot of those games are more pick up and deliver style. So they give you a sandbox, world, but then essentially the best strategy is to pick up things and deliver it to another location. And so I think really what makes Western Legends different is there are a couple of pick up and deliver options in the game, but by no means are they the most powerful. The game really goes well with going wanted or going martial. Those two tracks are balanced really well with one another. But in the demo tonight, we had a player win that he was on the martial track for a little bit, but he wasn't going around and arresting wanted players. He was going to the saloon and playing poker and earning a lot of his points through playing poker because his character ability benefited him playing poker. And so he would go to the saloon, he'd play poker, and then he would win. He would take his winnings and he would use some of those winnings to just start another hand of poker. And he got a lot of points that way and ended up winning. We actually ended up, it's very balanced to the point where we had 6 players playing in tonight's demo. So we had a full complement of players, and 3 of those 6 players ended up tied at the end of the game. After all in-game scoring was factored in, we had 3 players that were tied, and we actually had to go 3 tiebreakers deep to figure out who actually won the game.
Wow.
So it was
Wow.
pretty incredible experience there, and it was the first time we've ever had to go 3 tiebreakers deep. Usually the first one gets it, and so it was to the point where we actually had to pull the rules up and look at I know we've got 3 tiebreakers. What's the third one? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you have the ability. I mean, I personally have played the game. When we first were doing development, I loved going the wanted track and being the bad guy running around robbing the bank and robbing other players and just generally wreaking havoc out there. And then, here recently, I've really, I want to try my hand on the other side of the strategy. I want to see how this martial track plays because I was so used to playing wanted and I had kind of one way I was playing. So I jump over to the martial track and then now I'm chasing the wanted players and I'm arresting them with my poker cards and my guns and stuff that I've picked up and items that I've bought. And have been able to win games that way as well. We've had players stay neutral the entire game and win just on a mining strategy. Go in, prospect for gold, take those gold nuggets, deposit them in the bank for points, and kind of rinse and repeat that strategy. Now, it's risky because you're prospecting for gold. You're literally rolling dice, so you're kind of at the mercy of a die roll. And then traveling from the mine to the bank, you're at the mercy of players not robbing you and taking the gold nuggets from you before you have the chance to deposit. So there's so many paths to victory on here, and you're like I said, you're robbing the bank, you're robbing players, you're arresting wanted players, you're rustling cattle, wrangling cattle, you're playing poker, you're buying things at the general store, you're healing yourself up at the doctor's room, you're reveling at the cabaret for points and just throwing a giant party, prospecting for gold, you're taking the NPC bandits off the board at the bandit hideouts. There's so many things that you can do. And, I've seen games where players, really high player interaction in each other's face the whole time. And I've seen games where players kind of branch out and they just kind of go do their own thing and try to achieve their own goals as they're playing it out. So it's you're right. We've play tested a lot, and there have literally been no two games that have played out the same.
BJ from Board Game Gumbo here on Gumbo Live. I've got Mark Burke from Kolossal Games, who's talking about Western Legends out on Kickstarter right now. Hey, we've talked about the gameplay and we've talked about some of the things you can do. Let's talk about the production. What I can see on the Kickstarter page, and by the way, congratulations. You guys have not only funded the first day, but oh my God, this thing is just blowing up. $387,000 already with still 5 days to go. Because, I mean, as you know, the last 2 days, that's when you're really going to get that big kicker. But let's talk about some of the production elements. I've got a picture of the game board. Can you see the game board right now?
Yep, sure can.
Yeah, tell the folks what we're looking at here on the game board.
The game board itself centers around two towns. Red Falls and Dark Rock are the two towns. And then kind of the outlying areas. So we have areas like Mosquito's Point, Sunny Hills, Cliff Junction. There's Dixon Creek, which is kind of the little valley between the two towns. But what you're looking at there is the original graphic design for the game, or for the board, was done by Brian Lee, who did a lot of graphic design. He's worked with Travis a lot in the past on Heroes Wanted. He did a lot of stuff with Action Phase and with indie boards and cards as well. He did the initial graphic design on the board, got it laid out, helped us with the spaces, and made sure that bandit camps weren't too close together, mines weren't too close to the bank, and those types of things. And then once the graphic design was done and laid out, and he did a lot of the initial illustration, we passed it over to Roland, who did the artwork on the cards, and had him basically add that same watercolor, old yet fresh look to the board, so that it matched with the character cards and the art cards on the art on the poker cards as well. And so just really helping flesh out and bring this world to life, and little details. I mean, when I look at this board and I see, there's a river that kind of runs through the middle of the board there, and how the majority of the board is very much, red dirt, what you think of when you think Wild West. But if you look around the river, there's greenery spaces. So, because there's water there. So the plant life is growing around, around the ranch spaces. There are two ranches on the board where you can wrangle and rustle the cattle from. There's greenery on those spaces, because obviously your ranchers need to have, grass to feed the cattle. So, we've taken some details. If you look really close at some of the mine spaces on there, there's some of the mine spaces actually have mine carts and mine chutes that are next to them. The bandit hideouts have some caves that are kind of dug into the rock. So the attention to detail is incredible. That was done. We've even gone so far as to, in the towns themselves, kind of the streets that go through the town, the little main street area has a little bit more wear and tear, if you will, than the rest of the terrain does, because it's more heavily traveled. So again, Roland and Brian did some fantastic work on that board, and just kind of making that world pop off the table.
I've got some pictures of the minis going up right now. Can you see that right there?
Yep, sure can.
Yeah, tell me about those minis. It's so characters are going to pick they'll actually pick a different character, an actual historical figure, right?
Yep,
they'll have a mini that's related to that character, and then they'll explore that game board that you and I just looked at. Is this a final form for the minis, or are these just kind of production? Prototype type quality. What are we looking at?
What you're seeing in that picture that you have up there, those sculpts, the sculpts themselves are near final. There's a couple tweaks to make to them, but you're looking at the actual resin miniatures there. The miniatures in the game will actually be plastic, like your typical miniatures games are. But you're looking at resin miniatures there. Those are the sculpts. And in the game, the way the miniatures are set up is they're not character specific. So if I choose to be Billy the Kid, there's not a Billy the Kid miniature that I'm going to grab out of the box. We have
Ah,
some character specific miniatures that have been unlocked as stretch goals. So we have a character specific miniature for Wyatt Earp, one for Calamity Jane, one for Jesse James. We've got some other things coming in stretch goals that will surely going to knock out over the course of these last few days of the campaign. But the minis themselves are actually more archetypes. So we have one called the Gunslinger, one called the Gambler, and one called the Cowboy and the Gentleman. There's a Frontier Scout. So there's all these different types of, they're more archetypal miniatures. And they're set so you grab the miniature that you want to represent you on the board. You'll have your typical player, your colored player ring that you snap on the bottom of it to indicate, so that it matches the player board. But yeah, those are final sculpts, and those are done by the folks over at Pure Arts. They're the same studio that did the miniatures for Kemet, Cyclades, Inish, a lot of the Matago titles out there. And they're one of the last studios out there that still do hand sculpted work. So they're absolutely stunning.
yeah, they are gorgeous. BJ from Board Game Gumbo here, Gumbo Live. I've got my guest Mark Burke from Kolossal Games. We're talking about Western Legends. It's out on Kickstarter right now. Mark, you guys have about 5 days left. Is that right?
That's correct. It goes through Sunday. We're shutting down at I think 11:59. So literally end of the day on Sunday, the campaign will close.
Do you guys have anything cooking for the last couple of days? Are there stretch goals that haven't been revealed yet?
There are. We have several stretch goals that are yet to be revealed. We're kind of trickling them out 3-4 at a time as it goes. We've got, with the last batch that we revealed, there are 3 of them that have yet to be unlocked, and we'll be pushing some others out. Once those 3 get knocked off, we'll push some more out. So we're kind of keeping some things close to the vest right now, keeping it interesting, keeping it a little veil of mystery as we go into the last few days here. But I think that the backers and the folks that are getting in on the campaign are going to be really excited with what they see once we knock out these next few goals. We've got some component upgrades that we're running through now. We'll be adding new story cards because a story card mechanic that works in the game a little bit unique there. So we're unlocking new story cards to just again up the replayability and the replay value of the game. So you'll see some things going there, and then we've got a couple surprises up our sleeves still.